Yeah, it's a little. Okay. Hey, Lance, can you hear me? Can anybody in the webinar hear me? Aaron, are you raising your hand because you can hear me, or just somebody type in the chat? I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. Hi, Rachel. I don't think I muted you guys. Hello, sir. How are you? Is that Lance? Oh, he can't hear me.
And said everybody in the chat is disabled and everybody is muted.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me.
Because you can hear her, right?
Hang on a second. How do I?
Ooh, okay.
Good morning.
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 You got it fixed, Annie?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna mute myself again real quick.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tina.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Shelley. I heard your voice.
Good morning.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to get one this year. And then that year, we made it up.
All right, well, I think we're good to go now, so I will go ahead and get started. Thanks.
What's that? We're gonna need lunch.
Okay, guys, sorry for the technical snafu here. You guys still see me in Zoom? I'll show my camera real quick. Say hi. Start video.
You can probably watch it on here. I don't know, but listen to what Gary's got his speaker on.
I don't know if you guys can see me, but I'm saying hi.
Yeah, I can.
Hello.
Good morning.
Yes, we can. I can see you.
I'm sorry. I'll turn it off. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I think we got everyone.
There's a few that.
Yeah, they're having trouble with their sound, aren't they?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Did you get it on?
Oh, no. He's probably just gonna be able to watch it.
one.
Yeah.
Make your microphone.
We're going to go ahead and get started. What I would ask of everyone, because everyone has been unmuted from the data mark side. If you guys could just
You don't mute it.
all mute your lines.
Microphone.
Yeah, they want you to mute it.
Everybody should be muted because we're hearing all the audio coming through into the classroom.
Okay.
Well, how do I?
They would mute everybody.
I don't know how you do that.
Mute.
I'm muted.
Oh, here it is.
Got you.
Yeah, so if everybody could please just mute your lines, that way we don't have people talking on top of each other. The chat feature is currently not working in Zoom, and it seems to be an issue that we've had lately. So I just wanted to let you all know that you can feel free to use the Q&A at, yeah, Shelly says, can you see the Q&A session? So if you guys have questions, I can open it up for questions periodically in the virtual classroom, but you can also feel free to use the Q&A, and Shelly can let me know when those questions are coming in. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, Lance, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for introduction. And Lance, you might be on mute. I see you, Lance. I just can't hear you. He was just working a little while ago. It says he's unmuted. It says he's unmuted on here.
He says nobody can hear. Can you hear Amy? Can you hear? And you cannot hear me. Okay, they can't hear anything now.
I hate this so much. Okay. Is stuff still on? Let me look. Why is this so hard? It should not be this hard. Nothing should be this difficult. Okay.
Hold on, let me see if they can hear me. You know, let me-
Lance, can you hear me?
I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm unmuted. They just heard me. I don't know why.
Said it changed whenever you raise your hand. Try to put you back as a visitor. You may just have to have.
Yeah, we're both panelists here. I mean, you see that. So, and
Yeah.
we're both unmuted. So I don't know what the. My volume's all the way up. I mean, everything's.
Take him out as a panelist. He's working. It's very interesting.
Change role to attendee. All right, let's see.
Okay, can you hear us, Lance?
Lance, loud talk.
Yeah, I know about.
Hold on.
There we go.
All right, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
You're not doing the repository. I'll
That's
show
fine.
from here.
That's all right. We saw it a while ago on the screen, so. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off.
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Let's see, I don't think the chat is working, but you can hear me. I'm gonna do a real quick check to make sure that Tina or Shelley, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Lance.
All right, awesome. Let's get,
Yes,
All right,
I can
awesome.
hear you too.
perfect. Let's get busy then. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Lance Terry. I'm the state 911 coordinator. Just a little bit about me, since there's some folks on that probably we've never met before. I've got about 33 years in the business and in 911 itself. Not a GIS person. I've done some GIS work in the past, and I'll kind of tell a little bit about that. But I started out in Chickasha, Oklahoma, as dispatcher, jailer, and jack of all trades. And then after being there a year, I went to Midwest City, where I spent 13 years, and that's where I cut my teeth kind of on GIS and using GPS in the field and tracking officers and things like that. Learned the background of a lot of the technology, computer dispatch, MSAG, alley data, things like that. Learned as much as I could at Midwest City. And after 13 years, I went to Norman, where I was the director for 14 years as the director over the 911 center and also the radio system for the city. So, if it has to do with public safety communications, anywhere in between the citizen and the responder, I've pretty much dealt with it. And so, and our slogan here at our office is, we're here to help. And truly, we want to be here to help. We want to be able to, when you can't get questions answered related to public safety communications end to end, then I hope that you could reach out to me and I can at least point you in the right direction. So as we get started with this class, we have, and I'll let everybody in the room there do introductions here in a minute, or somebody else will take that on. But GIS is extremely important to the core mission of Next Generation 911. Moving from a tabular type data set that comes in and searches an MSAG and kind of in a wireless world, it goes back out and asks the wireless company, hey, where are you at? So we made this 1975 technology work the best we can. However, there's new technology out that's been out for years now, and a lot of states have adopted Next Generation 911. It's a standardized system that's a national standard, and and it helps fix a lot of things. The two primary focuses are to send the 911 call to the proper 911 center the first time, and provide a dispatchable address as soon as you answer the call. And that goes for any device that may be calling 911. In order to do that, we have to have GIS, and we have to have a GIS, a core GIS standardized data set to balance these calls against in order to know where to send it to and provide a dispatchable address. So as Oklahoma was thinking about this, and we were rolling through thinking about how, what's best for Oklahoma, we had a lot of lessons learned from other states. We went to Kansas, talked to them. We used a lot of their ideas, and we built off of that to hopefully provide a better solution at the end of the day. What I want everybody in the room to think about, and everybody online to think about, is your data historically in 911 center has just been in a vacuum. It's just between you and the 911 dispatcher. What I want you to think about with Next Generation 911 is sharing this information out, getting this information to the street. Utilizing the same data sets, the same GIS data from, the 911 system all the way through to the in-field responder, and then beyond that. Earlier, if you were on, you saw a picture when I was sharing my screen of the data that we've received so far in the state repository. So a couple of positive stories that came out of this. Well, to back up a little bit, the first thing is we want to make sure that we're sharing this information out also. And that gives a lot of people, makes the hair on the back of their neck stand up, and they're a little timid about, oh my gosh, other people are going to see my data. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're sharing this information out, and we want to make sure that we are creating a environment with our GIS data that has more eyes on it than just yours. We want to find errors. We want to fix errors. We want to provide the best data as possible. So the state has been working kind of in a beta test world with a couple of things. The first thing we did is we uploaded our data to the National Address Database, which is, I think there's like 8 parameters or something that we send up to them. And that's held by the National Transportation Office. And we sent that information to the NAD. And so all of our map points are now for these 15 counties and 2 municipalities that uploaded to the repository. Those are now displayed in the National Address Database. And those can be pulled back down by folks because it's an open source, go to it, see it, pull it down, use it however you need to. The other thing that we've done is we've been working with Google over the last 6 or 8 months to work on processes to become an authoritative source that's standardized. A lot of locals are authoritative sources with Google, but you do it one way, your neighbor does it a different way. And we want to standardize that, in which we have in 15 counties and 2 municipalities. But we are uploading that to Google. So we did our first upload, and we're thinking, okay, we'll see where this goes. Well, Google called about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, we got questions about your data. What's this? What's that? How's Oklahoma using this particular field and all this? So they were asking questions that absolutely led us to believe that they're going to use our data for an authoritative source to be able to improve their maps, especially in rural Oklahoma. So there's horror stories across the state where 911 call comes in, gets put into a localized limited CAD system. GeoSafe on the other end picks that up. GeoSafe is a mobile platform that's in the field, uses Bing Maps. We've literally heard of stories where fire department's going north, police department's going south, and fire tells police, where you going? And police goes, well, I'm going to the call, it's down here. And they go, no, it's north, 50 miles away from each other, because the mapping programs in rural Oklahoma just are not accurate. We get calls on a weekly basis here at the state office about Google addressing does not work in rural, when I go search my address in Google, it doesn't show up. So therefore my 911 address must not be correct. Well, that's not true. But the thing is 911's working in a vacuum, and we're not sharing that information out. So we want to solve multiple problems. So another positive story that came out of it is I gave a presentation at the GI Council about a month ago or so. And a couple of weeks ago at the SCOG conference, 811 or Call Okie approached me and said, hey, I saw that demo that you did, or the presentation you gave. So I went out to the National Address Database, the NAD, and downloaded those map points. And he goes, oh my gosh, because we're using those now. We're using those to help locate lines and send our teams out to locate lines. And I hear it, it's like, well, hey, this is public safety and we shouldn't be using this for, well, just breathe for a second, because if you've ever been in the dispatcher's chair when you had a medium or high pressure gas line hit by a backhoe, I can promise you that's public safety. And in order to mitigate that, you got to properly map the lines and all of that. So if municipalities and ONG and everything's using a shared data set, then hopefully we can, in years to come, we can start improving all of our data and locating lines and everything that goes along with that. So, and the last thing I want to say, I think, well, 2 things. First is grants. We do have grant funding available. I'm not going to get into the details of it. You can go to our website and find that out at ok.gov/911. We have computer-aided dispatch grants that are 80/20. We have consolidation grants that are 80/20. We have next generation 911. So if you need a digital recorder at your PSAP that needs to be NG 911 compliant, we can help pay for that recorder at 80/20. They're all reimbursable grants. Then we have 2 grants that are 100% reimbursed. The first one is training, and that's training for dispatchers and technologists. So if you need technical training on your 911 equipment or whatever it may be, we can help pay for that. And then the next thing is GIS. So we started in July funding 100% grants for GIS. So, take advantage of this. And this whole class that Andy's about to present goes over, hey, this is what you're going to have to do. If you can't do it, go get a grant and use one of the 6 vendors on state contract, and let's get you up and going. But if you use a state vendor that's on state contract and you get a grant, don't forget to get the tools that you need, the training that you need, and that means even if you need Esri training, please put in for that when you put in for that grant, because we want to make sure that you're trained and you can keep up with this for years to come. And the last thing I'll say is, truly, this is really the last thing, is this is doing nothing but helping GIS professionals at the local level and 911 coordinators at the local level. Over the last 20 years, we have watered down and kind of dissolved the 911 coordinator, and it shows. Our wireless routing's broken, our MSAGs aren't being updated because somebody leaves and the county commissioner goes, oh, they didn't do anything anyway. Hey, Susie, can you take this on? Here, and Susie's like, I don't know what to do, but the county commissioner told me to do it, so I guess I'll do it. And we've lost a lot of that knowledge over the last 20 years. We want to take initiatives like this and build up the 911 coordinators. We want to put you in a position to be successful. If you are the central repository for GIS data, over the next 10 years, it's going to do nothing but grow, and you're going to continue to build a more recognition within your position at the local level. So utilize this, use it to help you sell your positions at the local level, and let's help all of public safety end to end, get to the calls faster, save lives, and make Oklahoma a better place to live. So I'll turn it over to Annie. I'm heading to the Capitol for an interim study, and good class. Annie, I appreciate all your time. Don't leave out Shelley and Charles, because make sure and let them give their intro. So that's all I got. Don't leave them out. I'm out, guys. I appreciate it. If you have questions, holler at me. We're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. We appreciate you. Thanks so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Okay. Shelley, would you like to introduce yourself and Charles?
I'm not sure.
I'm Shelley Willoughby. I work for the Oklahoma Office of Geographic Information. I am the Assistant State GIS Coordinator for the state of Oklahoma. One of the many hats I wear is I'm helping coordinate training, and in my office also host the repository that Lance is talking about. So all of the data that comes in comes through my office. We are working with contractors and various other people to build that repository to give those resources back to the citizens of Oklahoma. So as you have questions or you have issues or need help with the toolkit or anything like that, certainly give me a call, maybe email. I tell people I can't answer your question, but I can point you to somebody. So, a lot of times it's just finding that right person. So a lot of times I can get you on that track. So welcome. Thank you guys for working with us with the technical issues this morning. It's been a little bit of a challenge, but we appreciate you guys.
Okay, Charles, can you come up here, because the sound is coming from my computer, so they're saying that they're having a hard time hearing.
Okay. I'll make short and sweet. Charles Brady, City of Ardmore GIS Coordinator, also the address manager. I work a little bit with address and work a little bit with 911.
Thank you, Charles.
If you have any questions, holler.
The end. Okay, so now we're going to go around the room. I would just like to know who you are and kind of what you do, what brings you to the class today. So we'll start with you. Okay. Okay, thank you for coming.
In the communications over dispatch and GIS for Grady County Sheriff's Office.
Simone, I'm the GIS specialist there.
Billy Curley, I'm with Ottawa County.
Okay. Okay,
Alston Hicks, Fort Sill, GIS.
And Peterson, I'm the Fort Sill GIS manager.
great. And do we want to have intros online too? No? Okay. No, it's okay. I'm unmuted, but it's not, it's just there's a ton of you joined from online. So what I'll ask everybody to do online as well. And by the way, guys, just, I don't know if you heard me earlier, but if you could just keep your line muted if you need to speak, that would be great. But you should have like a little hand raising tool online. I would like everybody in here to raise your hand if you are an addressing authority. Same with our online folks. Okay, Shelley, Rachel, James, Alexa. Okay, great. And online, are you guys also GIS? Raise your hand if you're GIS as well. Okay, what about public safety? Okay. Okay, great. Well, I am going to share my screen. I'm so happy that I remembered that I had to do that. I can just share this. Oops. Okay, I'm going to show you guys a short video that that we worked with the state to create to promote all of the initiatives here for NG 911.
The path to Next Gen 911 runs through your GIS data. So what does that mean?
GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, manage, analyze, and map data. GIS connects data to a map, integrating location data with descriptive information. Dispatchers, they depend on this GIS, just like we depend on the dispatchers to guide us and lead us in the right direction. In public safety, we use GIS data not only to find the emergency, but in a way that to make incoming calls are routed to the proper 911 center. Because of this, the development of public safety grade GIS data is highly important. Public safety grade GIS data represents data that is 98% accurate and complete, establishes GIS data standards for next generation 911, and enables routing of 911 calls to the appropriate destination, and much, much more.
Next Gen 911 ready GIS data affects more than just public safety. Voter registration, census data, and more local governmental departments use GIS data to perform their duties every day.
I really can't tell you that there's a department that's not touched by it in some way or another.
Because of its importance, the state of Oklahoma has created a GIS standard and toolkit designed to assist localities with GIS data preparation for the next generation 911. It is critical that localities take the necessary steps to upgrade their GIS data for next generation 911 to ensure accurate call routing for emergencies and enhanced internal operations.
You are not alone in this effort. The state of Oklahoma is here to assist you through grant funding, training, and additional tools to ensure your success. For more information on this initiative and to learn next steps, visit www.ok.gov/911.
Excellent. Charles, can you take a peek at Shelley's screen and see if you can see the PowerPoint? Okay, great. Just a reminder for our friends online, the chat feature is not currently working with Zoom. So if you guys want to drop any questions into the Q&A, Charles and Shelley are going to keep an eye on that so that I can answer your questions as well. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Annie Cahill. I'm with Datamark. I recognize some of you from last year's classes, from the different conferences that we've had lately. And I'm a GIS, public safety GIS technical consultant, which basically means that I help people figure out what they need to do with anything related to GIS, public safety, addressing, NG911, and all that stuff. Datamark is one of the approved vendors on the state's list. We have worked with some localities here in Oklahoma to get their GIS data ready for NG911 and also to help them with addressing and any other questions that they have. So my role at the company is I handle all of our strategic planning. If someone needs an NG911 GIS strategic plan, then I go on site and I work with them to help them figure out where their problems are, what they might need to get ready in terms of their workflows and their data. A lot of the initiative, especially regarding the second class, is about the data itself. But for those of you who work in GIS or touch any GIS data, you guys understand that the entire workflow really shapes what the data looks like. It's not just about the data, okay? It all depends on who's got their hands on it, what's the business need, and then eventually how it trickles down to you is kind of going to determine what the data actually looks like, okay? I also run all of our company's boundary facilitation workshops. That's a service that we offer where we sit with our clients and their neighboring PSAPs. We've worked with many military bases as well, especially in the Region 1 Florida and in Maryland. So essentially for NG911, you're going to have to make sure that your PSAP boundaries are congruent and that you don't have gaps and overlaps and that you can come to an agreement about where your boundaries are. A lot of things people have maybe struggled with throughout the years, territory disputes, et cetera. And that's where we all sit down in a room and we figure it out. Sometimes we have to sing Kumbaya. I'm just kidding. I have terrible jokes. I don't know if you guys are ready. It's been a long week. So we already watched our video. I already have a good understanding. We have, what? Oh, okay. I already have an understanding of kind of the roles of everyone in the room and online. So now let's talk about GIS and NG911. So we offered this class last year. It was actually last winter, like February timeframe, and it was very GIS heavy, and a lot of people didn't like that. That was one of the criticisms that we had received. So I've tried to take out a lot of the super nerdy stuff, but I just need you all to understand that GIS is the marriage of geography and information, and that's what makes it so powerful. It's an entire system that works together. It's hardware, software, data, and people, okay? And it all works together in one system that we can use to store data, analyze it. We can ask questions of the data. The data can help us solve problems. And as it relates to NG911, the GIS data is actually making the decisions for where the call goes. Okay, so in a current call routing environment, the MSAG and the ALI are two tables that are owned by the telephone companies, and that really dictates how those calls are routed. And often locals don't own that data. The data is notoriously inaccurate or incorrect, it's missing information. And so what NG911 does is it actually empowers the localities to, number one, have a say in that data and maintain that data, but also be very specific with how accurate that data is, okay? So in the next generation 911 environment, the GIS data is actually routing the call. It's activated before the call ever comes into the 911 center. So think about how GIS is used today in 911. Often it's used as what? A reference, right? Okay, well, here's a neighborhood, we need to drive here. Or maybe we use our road center lines. Maybe we have a routable road center line network and we're using that to determine the best route to get to a location. But now we're using it for actually routing the call, the phone call, okay? So GIS uses geospatial data. This is data that has a space in the real world, okay? And again, we can ask a lot of this data because we not only have the geometry, but we also have the attributes behind it, okay? And ideally, we want our GIS to model what's in the real world. How many of you are confident that your GIS does this, that your address points reflect all of the addresses in your community, that your road center lines reflect all of the road center lines in your community? Raise your hand. Yeah, so that's, I mean, it's pretty common. Some folks are pretty confident, others not so much. And this is actually a totally normal thing. We're all in this journey together. And part of this is about helping you to understand what you need to do to make this happen, okay? So for NG911, I told you that the data has a role, okay? And there are required layers that are in the data model, the national data model, and then there's the state data model, which has an extra layer as well as some extra fields that have to be maintained. So the primary ones that you might be familiar with are road center lines and address points. In the state model, you do have to have ESZs, but ESZs are not for call routing. Okay, that's not what's actually used in the spatial interface for call routing. You do have to have a discrepancy agency boundary. And what that is it's essentially a geofence that tells the spatial interface, this is the area for which I'm responsible. This is my kind of bowl that holds all of my data. This is my fence around my data, what I'm responsible for. Because when that data is provisioned to the spatial interface, whichever one is chosen from your next-gen core service provider, is going to run through a set of checks and balances on that data. It's going to identify any anomalies, and it's going to send it back to whoever is identified as the discrepancy agency. Okay, so the discrepancy agency boundary is really about error reporting, okay, and understanding who's responsible for the data. Your PSAT boundary is the call routing boundary, okay? That tells the call where it's going, basically, okay? And then in next generation 911, you do have to have individual ESBs for fire law and EMS. Some of you already have that, or you might call it something else. And you can always start with what you have to create these boundaries. You don't always have to start from scratch. And if you come to the toolkit class, which is in a few weeks, the first class that we're offering, we're going to show you the tool that helps you to basically create individual ESBs from your ESCs, okay? So what's a data model? A data model basically defines all of the layers that are required, which we just looked at. It also defines the attributes. Attributes describe a feature. By the way, if you're not a GIS person, the words feature, class, shapefile, layer, those are all kind of used interchangeably depending on who you're talking to. And for simplicity's sake, you know, I kind of go back and forth between feature, class, and layer. So just to let you know, I don't usually talk about shapefiles, but you know, people still use them and they're still very relevant, especially for like the CAD systems and so forth. But just to let you know that that's the terminology. So every feature class, every layer, okay, address points, road center lines, call routing boundaries, whether it's your PSAT boundary or your ESBs, they all have required attributes, okay? And this is not just because, you know, at the national level, they're trying to make your life hard, or at the state level. It's because this data has a role. This data is actively engaged during a 911 call, and that's why certain fields are required, okay? And so those are attributes. So your data model defines the attributes that should be present within the data. Those are required, optional, or conditional. Or I think it's mandatory, conditional, and optional, basically, okay? It also defines the relationship. So in GIS, we use a word called topology, and this refers to the relationship either of feature to feature, road center line to road center line, or feature class to feature class, or one layer to another layer. So for example, if I say to you, all address points and all road center lines must be contained within your discrepancy agency boundary, that's an example of a relationship, okay? And a data model also defines that as well, all right? So I did mention to you that the state of Oklahoma has their own GIS standard for NG911, and really it does model the national standard. It does model the national data model, but it does include, like I said, you have to have ESCs in the state. And it also has some extra layers, or I'm sorry, some extra attributes for like storm shelter information and so forth. So if you take a look at the two data models, there's not much of a difference. It's just that the state says, yeah, you also have to have the ESD layer, and you also have a couple more attributes that you can use. And then there's like some transportation fields as well in the road center lines, but those are not required in that model. Okay. So when we start talking about accuracy and completeness, what we're talking about is, and we mentioned this earlier, does everything that I have reflect what's in the real world? Some of you raised your hand, some of you didn't. So what are your concerns there, like in the class? What are your concerns with accuracy? Why do you think that your data doesn't match what's in the real world? If that's a concern of yours. What's holding you back from that? Do you think you have all your address points? Yes.
So essentially, I mean, I'm kind of new to this type of GIS world where G911, what we have currently and what I've learned is it's a lot of people came before, did some things, didn't add that they did it, and now it's just lost in the void of GIS. It's somewhere in the data, somewhere in a folder. So it's like you have to go back, and it's hard to kind of adjust certain layers and stuff like that when you're missing data, you know, and you have mandatory fields and you don't know where they are, although you see the layer there, it's just not properly filled out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's my biggest
Yeah.
issue with updating and making sure it's as accurate as possible.
So maybe someone added points in, but they didn't assign all the attributes, or some things are sketched. Like you don't know what you're really looking at. Like why is there an address point with a 0 address? What is that? Or maybe, you know, maybe there was a road that was realigned, you know, 15 years ago, but nobody ever reflected that in the GIS, or you know, somebody drew in a roundabout and nobody reflected that in the GIS, stuff like that. That's what we're kind of talking about. But that is a very common thing. And folks online, you can drop in the Q&A too, if this has been your experience, that obviously, and I kind of always go back to this, but remember that GIS emerged as a land management tool. That's how it started. So that's why you often find GIS in planning departments, because that's kind of where it started. And so planning business needs are very different than utility business needs, than public safety. And the business need always shapes what the data looks like. Okay. Even if it came down to you and you said, well, you know, now I'm the maintainer, you might have a very long road ahead of you with your data quality just because of kind of what you were handed. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. It's like, it needs something, but you're not entirely sure what, but you know it's not the greatest data. And that has been something that has been our experience. So when we start talking about, and I always go back to address points, because two of the most mismanaged things that I see, and this is through the strategic planning process from coast to coast, because I've been in all these different states, and a lot of things are kind of like universal norms here in the United States. If you're a county who has an addressing responsibility, but you also have municipalities like cities and towns who are their own addressing authorities, that can be a major issue. Because why? Because some people don't have GIS. Some people have a great system of writing things down on Post-it notes, or, you know, you have Beulah Jones that's been sitting, I don't know what, that was a terrible name, but you have Beulah's been sitting in her office for 20 years and she just jots stuff down on a piece of paper, and there's no real records of addresses, and maybe there's no communication. That's the biggest thing as we talk today. Communication is a major issue. So municipality as the addressing authorities, that definitely impacts completeness of your addresses and accuracy, because let's face it, how many municipalities are coordinating with their counties to make sure that addresses fit within the system? Often none, right? And that's not a problem for public safety, is it? The other thing is subaddressing. So questions like, do I assign a primary or do I assign a sub? How many of you have mobile home parks in your communities? Yeah, huge issue. A lot of times, and I really hate to say this, but I wouldn't say a lot, but several times we've had people come to us as our clients due to a fatality that's occurred. Everybody thinks it can't happen in my community, but it can and it does. And bad addressing is a real issue. It's a real issue. And so that's something that, you might not think about it, but the big picture stuff, this is what we're kind of talking about with accuracy and completeness. So when we talk about completeness, we're kind of looking at it like a telescoping thing. So do I have all the required layers? We already talked about those. Am I missing data from the layer? Am I missing address points? Am I missing chunks of road center lines? I've spent a considerable amount of time in Alabama this year. And I've had many conversations with folks who say, our planning process is kind of affecting the way that we get our road center lines into our GIS. So there are a lot of processes that occur upstream that you may not think about that impact ultimately what the data looks like. Okay. Am I missing fields? Or do I have all the fields populated that are required? This is kind of what we're talking about. Okay, so the state has a toolkit. How many of you attended last year the toolkit class? Okay, I thought a couple of you did. So basically the state developed a toolkit that helps you get your GIS data ready for NG 911. Okay, and we will be back in a few weeks, and I have the schedule at the end of the class, so you don't have to rush to write stuff down because I have the schedule at the end of the class. You guys can see we'll be back the week before Thanksgiving. And that's the first class. And then we're also coming back again in January. Yeah, and we're coming back again in January to do another round. Okay, but we're going to teach you this toolkit and how you can use this to get your data ready. This is desktop, not pro. Just letting you guys know that. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Yes. Honestly, don't expect it anytime soon. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting because what's been explained to us is that the developers are really focusing on fleshing out the version for desktop, because once they start developing for pro, they're going pro and that's it. So they're going to stop the desktop development. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that out there for you guys because we've had some.
Yeah, I've seen very little. I don't think I've seen any of ours on pro at all.
That's the reason we're not doing pro yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
When are they thinking about transitioning? Because you guys already know about supporting it for the next probably 2 years.
Well, they've said that for the last 10.
So this time I believe it. I mean,
Yeah, it really is.
yeah, as we're transitioning, I believe it. They cut off desktop, they've gone to version 10.9.1 and 11 on server level. Yeah, and they're serious. I mean, they've even informed the Army of that. I mean, they're serious.
Yeah.
I think it depends a lot on what we're seeing from the PCAP and the people that are working on this data. As we see those start to migrate, then we will follow the feeling of the group. Like I said, right now, most of those people are on desktop, but when we were talking to them, there was just that handful that was on pro, everyone else was desktop. So as we see them moving in, see those communities, effort to move everybody.
I mean, we're even slow at our installation. We've got pro, but we've been in the software for 20 years. It's hard for us to transition.
I know.
So.
And that's where a lot of us are. It's just like we've got pro and we're like,
yeah.
No. Oh, I was.
Okay, so yeah, and we can talk more about the software and the toolkit at the end of the class. I did want to talk to you guys about NG 911 workflow because a lot of what you hear about with the GIS and NG 911 is just about data, and it's a very I don't know, it's a very narrow kind of frame of mind when you're looking at this because, like we said, there's a lot of things that impact what that data eventually looks like when it finally gets to you. Okay. So I wanted to ask you guys, what's preventing you from getting ready for NG911? Think about all the things, all the struggles, and this is a safe space. And the same with folks online. So I'll open it up to the classroom first. What are some things that are preventing you from getting ready for NG911? Like, what are some stumbling blocks that you guys have?
So the Army, in their infinite wisdom, has contracted out with the Naval Information Warfare Center. So they actually did all of our next gen 911 conversion for us. We just reviewed it, sent it back. We're gonna have a national standard brought back to us in November. What we're worried about is how do we maintain that moving forward. So we've got a wonderful system. We've got the server architecture. We've got the GIS experience. But this is the first time that we're managing the addresses in the next gen 911. And we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And so I think it's, I mean, we'll figure it out, but we're looking, for our industry professionals. Okay, what are your best practices and recommendations for us moving forward? And then it's also about grasping the big picture. We know our little, how does this work? How is this going to get plugged into the system? What can we do better? Those are more what I think my worries are. Also, I mean,
It's just, how do we add a new building? We have 2 new buildings being built. How do we update the system? What buttons do we click?
yeah, and where does it go after we run it? Do we turn it back into federally? What about the geocoders? Do we just give it to the state and we're done with it? I mean, what's that work for?
I'm thinking this is probably a whole other discussion because you got me curious.
Oh, I'm excited.
So, we throw in the toolkit, what happens? And then also, at what point in time, I realized the military, I've worked with several of them before, but at what point in time does civilian have an impact on military whenever there's any incident and you're wanting a response from civilian that needs that data? Does it just go, okay, we stop at the gate and we just stop at the gate, or do we actually, that interaction, that's probably a derail of.
No, but it's all relevant. It's all relevant.
Well, we're working on that. We just brought 911 back in-house from, so we're working those out. They have a very good relationship from understanding goes back and forth, and other people, our 911 people are actually there. But that being said, we're happy to share our data too. We want to file with the state. We've got to make sure we can. We have to strip out anything that may be, an issue for the operational security of our soldiers.
Sure.
But other than that, we're happy to share. We want to give the data.
My main thing is I'm curious if you take the format that they've got on a national level, if they're putting into saying as next gen, you throw it to the toolkit. Okay, is it going to be a straight pass through, or is it going to just?
Well, and that's what we're hoping. That was literally the question I just asked him. I was like, I wonder if this is going to work. That was one of the questions.
I am very curious.
We have the data. Now we have the first deliverable. We said, okay, here's some problems you need to fix. I'm happy to provide it and let you guys run through there and figure out what's going to work with the toolkit. Or we'll get a copy of the toolkit. We plan on attending that class.
Oh, good.
So we'll
Awesome.
sample that data.
Bring it. And I mean, like I said, you pique my curiosity. I'm curious to see exactly how it's going to work.
So the Navy did it. So the Army has no faith in the Navy.
No, I do a police officer fire all the time, so I understand that level. I can get into that one. Yeah.
We created a new number address for every single building that historically has been named a number for years.
Building number.
So you have this 4-digit building number that was 1950 for years, and now it has a totally different, unique address number. And now we're trying to determine what do we do? Spend $1 billion and label everything? Do we just keep everyone confused and on their toes?
My first, right?
No.
My initial assessment on that one, there's a difference between a building number and an address, and I would keep those things separate because historically you're going to look at that because I did that with my airbase.
But Charles, now there's a difference. For the last 160 years on Fort Sill, there wasn't. It was the building number of the road, and that was the facility. That was the address. So now, when we're embedding this, we brought this up. We estimate it's going to be $4 million just to redo the signs in Fort Sill. That's $4 million of our taxpayer dollars we prefer not to spend.
Understood.
So those are concerns we have that are more internal. But yeah, I mean, how do we go to this new system? For 911, it's easy. They just start using the new address.
Yeah, but
what about the geocoders and the GIS data has to reflect that? Those are all GIS issues that we
auditing sometime. I'd be interested to-
Oh, yeah. No, man, you're welcome to walk on the Fort Sill and take you in there and show you around and what we got, what we're running. So,
And that might be an option too. That's seriously about that.
I'll come.
I go with
we're
How
happy to-
about-
happy to host you.
How about anybody else? I mean, does that resonate with you guys as well? Like how to, if you're getting your data back, has anybody chosen a vendor to help them with their data? Have you guys done that yet? Okay, so I always tell people that when you get the data back, that's the hard part. That's when the hard part starts. Like I can make your data shiny and polished and I can get you where you need to be. But I've worked with so many folks who have gotten their data back. And it's not, I mean, I don't want to place blame, vendor or client or whatever, but you all have to understand how to maintain the data going forward. I've talked to a lot of people like way early on who received sparkly data back, and within a month, they're back to very bad data management practices, and then everything gets hosed again. So that's when the hard part starts. Yes, okay, fine, you got somebody to make your data shiny and perfect, but what's your plan going forward? Okay, and I mean, I know how we would address that as a company. I can't speak for anyone else, but that's when the hard part really starts. And that's kind of why we talk about this workflow situation, because after the data gets perfect, you have to have a path forward. So what about anybody else? Are you guys experiencing any other roadblocks that are keeping you from getting ready for NG 911, whether it's with the data or with anything else? Addressing authority issues. I know we talked about municipalities earlier. Anything else? Resources, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, oh, we got all this. Well, this guy can do it. They don't do nothing. I know in my county, they had a full-time 911 coordinator. Then they decided, well, they're retired. They don't do nothing.
Yeah.
Part-time. They don't do nothing. And I was the 911 supervisor. I'm like, this guy's not working. And Expire EMS is yelling at us. So when the last guy finally was gone, they're like, oh, well, you're the one saying it don't work. And it probably needs to be someone in dispatch center anyway. So here you go. By the way, what do you do? Well, I'm figuring that out, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think all this is something.
Yeah. Attitude.
I need an address. I get it all the time. Need an address. I need it today. I gotta close this home. So that's how it works.
Yeah.
We contract with Spatial Data Research,
SDR, yep.
And we got to send it to them, and we both look at it, and so it's just understanding from public officials down, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So from experience, and I don't know if you guys online heard that, but basically a lot of the first bullet point resonates with people in the room: resources, having time, the staffing. So from a vendor perspective, because I also spent 15 years in local government in Virginia. So, but now I'm on the vendor side, and you guys have to understand that. And I was talking to Sam, they're another approved vendor on the list, but I was talking to Sam the last couple of days because they were in the classes. And Bruce had mentioned that for some rural counties, it can take them up to 300 to 400 hours to fix that data. And for us, it all depends on the size of the locality. We work with a lot of rural people, but then we've done big cities too. You have to think in your role, think about all the things that you do in your job. Okay. And I used this example yesterday. What did I say? Tax assessor / coroner / librarian. Like I've seen some really weird situations in local governments because like in Virginia, a lot of our communities, they have part-time town managers. Like they're not full-time folks, but they're still responsible for NG 911 and dealing with all that. So when you think about all the things that you do in your job, do you have 300 to 400 to 500 to 600 hours to dedicate to cleaning up your data and maintaining that? You don't have to respond, but just think about that on top of everything else. And then you think about people like us, people like Sam, any of these other vendors. We have teams, entire teams of people. That's all we do. That's our project. We may have multiple staff members working on that project, and then we send it back to you. So these are just some things that you need to think about. when we start talking about like workflow and data maintenance and how Lance mentioned the grants earlier, funding is huge. So now I'd like to open it up to our friends online. What about you guys? What are some of your roadblocks when getting ready for 911, NG 911? Does any of the stuff on the screen resonate with you guys? Hopefully you can still hear me.
I mean, speaking, just for the city of Shawnee, the staffing is definitely a roadblock if you're the only person that's doing it. And that's just from a municipality standpoint. I'm the only person that assigns addresses and deals with addresses, and everyone contacts me for it. But outside of that, I still have all the other infrastructure and planning and all that other stuff with GIS that I have to do on top of that. So definitely the staffing.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. All right, so key components of NG911 workflow. I can't venture too far away from the computer because they won't be able to hear me, although I do have a big mouth. You do need clearly defined roles and responsibilities. And I'm not talking about a job description because we all know in local government, a job description can be a lot different than reality, right? And in Virginia, like one of the favorite things to tack on at the end of a job description is all other duties as assigned. Okay, so that's how you end up with, being the county coroner as well as whatever else. So somebody had to do it. So anyway, what I'm talking about is that you have someone in your locality who is a designated something. Okay, maybe your addressing authorities in the planning department. Raise your hand if that's the case. Addressing authority in the planning department. Anybody online? You guys can raise your hand in the chat too. Yeah. And we've had a mix of planning folks too, but what that means is that you have defined roles and responsibilities and things are tied to that. So if I'm the addressing authority, the expectation is that I'm going to have an address assigned within X number of business days, and there's a communication pathway. Hopefully, an addressing authority is communicating and bringing in public safety prior to the address being assigned or a road name or subdivision being approved. Okay, there are lots of stories I have where that wasn't the case and it's caused a ton of problems. Okay. And that's why I listed out the road centerline authority differently, because sometimes that road centerline authority is different. Sometimes it's utilities, engineering, public works, whatever that looks like in your community. Okay. Public safety and GIS also have roles. Now, a blue sky scenario for me is that all of these things are in one department, but that's not usually the case, although I wish it were. Okay, because that way everybody's together, they're all communicating, and it's all happy, right? Communication and education is extremely important. Okay, if you have people who are assigning addresses, and I want to open this up. How many of you have issues with your addressing authority? Maybe the addresses are not being assigned like they're supposed to. Maybe you're getting complaints from first responders that people can't find certain addresses or that things are assigned out of order. Does anybody in the room have that issue? What about people online? Do you guys drop in the chat or the Q&A, or you can unmute and tell your story if you have that experience as well? Okay, well, it has been a very common thing in the last couple classes where people have said, look, we have some issues with our addressing authority. And this all comes back to communication. And a lot of it is because of lack of education. People don't know what they don't know. Okay, you can't expect somebody to assign addresses for planning or for public safety business needs when they've been in the planning department for 30 years and they just know how to do things one way. Okay, so that's part of education. Getting support when we talk about time and resources and attitude and lack of support, this is another reason you have to educate. And part of what we do as Datamark is that's one of our core beliefs, is that we need to educate people, because when you're educated, then you can make better decisions. And so often when we work with communities and they're like, look, we're not getting any support from the top, that's something that we can do, is come in and give them a presentation about what does NG 911 mean for you, why you can't just step out of it because it doesn't work that way. It's a nationwide thing that everybody has to do. And do you want to be the last person in your state and have to answer those questions? Okay. So education, communication, I go back to that all the time because communication is extremely important in a solid NG 911 workflow. Okay. How many of you have a process for how you handle addressing discrepancies or discrepancies in your GIS data? Do you guys have a process? Good. So a lot of people still work on Post-it notes, and they might get a call from somebody, oh, this is a bad address, and then it just kind of goes into oblivion, and that has to stop. So at the national level, all addressing or all data, GIS data anomalies have to be resolved within 3 business days. Okay. Now, our understanding of that requirement is evolving because I understand that if you have a real addressing issue, you're going to have to take time and work with property owners, and it's a whole thing. Okay. But when you provision your GIS data into the spatial interface, like I said earlier, it's going to run through a set of checks and balances, and then it's going to send back that data report to the discrepancy agency. Those have to be corrected within 3 business days. So you can't sit on things that are in error. If somebody calls to report an issue, either in the data or in the real world, you need to have a date and time stamp for that. Okay. And I always tell people, if you have a good relationship with your IT, this is a great time to say, hey, can we get into your ticketing system so that we can just use your ticketing system as a way to log addressing discrepancies? There's lots of different ways to do this. Okay. But it's just an idea. Obviously, data editing and management is a huge component of an NG 911 workflow. And then also your system updates. You want to make sure that your GIS, your CAD system, your 911 system, and whatever you're putting into the spatial interface is all reflecting the same information. Okay. And then, of course, risk mitigation. I do want to point out the importance of documentation here. Everything that you do, all of your processes should be documented. And I know that this is a pain. I get it. Okay. But if you have annual CAD updates or, anything like that, this is a perfect time to assess your documents and update them as needed. Okay. So that way, because I hear a lot about turnover. Well, we've had turnover. People don't know what to do when they come in. Well, whose fault is that? It goes back to the locality because you didn't have these things documented. So you want to be able, when you hire somebody, to say, go to this location on the server, here's how you do everything. Now, it's not to say they're not going to need some hand-holding, because that's how some people are, just naturally, right? But at least the general process is documented. How do I update the CAD system? What does that look like? Who are my contacts at Motorola or whoever you guys are using, Central Square, et cetera? How do I put an address in? Those things. Those are all things that can be documented for someone else to reference. Okay. Any questions about that? Anybody online have any questions? Hopefully you're still awake. I didn't bore you to death yet. Okay, so let's talk for a little bit about the responsibilities of the addressing authority. Okay, the whole purpose of an address is for public safety. I know that you guys like your Uber Eats. I've never actually used that. I can't imagine spending $35 for like a number 5 at McDonald's. Like, okay, but that's fine. I'm not judging. People like their Uber Eats. People like their Amazon delivery. Okay. People enjoy getting their mail, packages, boxes of baseball cards. This is very relevant to me. Okay. But addressing is for public safety, period. At the end of the day, addressing is about making sure that our first responders can get to where they need to go without a lot of confusion. Okay. And I understand that communities do things differently. But one of the roles as an addressing authority is to make sure that you're assigning addresses in a way that makes sense for first responders. Huge responsibility. So you have to follow the best practices. And if you guys, I don't know if you guys were at was it the public safety conference where I presented? that where I was? I don't remember where I am anymore. I was there a couple weeks ago and I did a whole presentation about best practices for addressing for NG 911 and road naming. We talked about the 3 business day requirement. I also want addressing authorities to start engaging public safety. A very common complaint that I have when I go and talk to different people about their addressing issues, a lot of them say, I don't have a lot of faith in my addressing authority. And the reason is because things are just being done without any regard for public safety. Okay, so road name review, stop approving duplicates, especially in the same zip code. I know that Mr. Smith was a good guy in the community. I know that. He's a great guy. I don't even know who that is. But you guys know, you have these people in your communities that have these prominent names, right? And things are named after people and could be buildings, could be roads, could be whatever. They're done. They have enough, right? You have to stop approving duplicates because it creates confusion for public safety, especially if they occur in the same zip code. We have a community in Virginia. The whole subdivision is Mulberry something. And it wasn't us, it was actually a municipality, again, who operated in a vacuum without notifying the county, okay? And the county is still expected to dispatch resources into the city, but they have no regard for verifying what they're doing with the county, okay? These are very real issues, all right? So start looping in your public safety people at the beginning of the process. And just say, look, you guys, you got to review this and get it out within 24 hours because you can't hold up our process, because that's what planning said. We can't hold things up. Okay, well, 24 hours is plenty. It's going to be all right. Okay, unique addressing scenarios. Where I live is like 300 years old, okay, in the city, and we have buildings that are mixed use. Okay, so you might have 3 or 4 businesses in the bottom that have different access points on different roadways, but then apartments upstairs, also with different access points, okay? Ask public safety how to handle this. What do you guys, when you're going out, when you're responding to this apartment that's back here that actually faces an alley, what do you guys want to do about this? Because you can't bring a fire truck down the alley. This is the kind of stuff that you need to talk to your public safety people about. Don't just wing it and assign something that's incorrect. Bring them in at the beginning of the process. Any questions about that? Is this resonating with anyone? Has this been an issue for you guys?
They issued addresses to things that we would ordinarily not issue addresses to, like memorials, monuments. Why do they need addresses? So those should be sub underneath other addresses, and then questioning what are subs, and then when you have like a hospital at where entry point, should every entry point have an address? So these are all the questions that we're trying to figure out whether they're relevant, and we're just new at being an addressing authority, so we're not really sure who to ask, a lot of these. So
just call me.
Well, yeah, now
I'm here.
Another issue is like on the road scenario, Sheridan Road. So Sheridan Road persists through Washington, Fort Sill, and then does a 90-degree turn and then goes back up. So we don't use directional prefixes.
Right.
And so when we did our addressing, are those addresses already issued for the county or lot? Now our vendor was supposed to work with the county. I don't know whether they did. They said they did. So that causes some concern is, when we turn this dead into the state, are we going to have conflicting addresses? We're federal.
Right.
So it doesn't really bother me because we're within but it will bother the state. So I'm trying to look at the big picture.
Sure.
Those are all the things that concern.
Yeah. And I think those are very valid concerns. And a lot of people don't realize, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but understanding the data model. So do you know that you can have an address without having a number? I know a lot of people, when I first got into NG 911, I was like, what? How is that possible? But if you look at the model, an address number is not a requirement. And we can talk about that if you guys want to. Yeah. Okay. How about online? Are you guys experiencing anything like this, or does this resonate with any of you who are addressing authorities or the ones who work with addressing authorities?
The road names duplication is a big issue that we struggle with, and it's something that our current staff is working to stay in the loop with the county as well as, planning department, things like that, just to make sure we're not getting duplicate names. We've run into it quite a few times. And recently we just had to go back and redo a future or a development on a plat because it turns out the county had a road that has never been really reported to anybody else. And we just happened to find it right before we took it to our commission. So definitely things that we're trying to improve on is just the duplicate names process.
Yeah, so does anybody have any thoughts about how you can mitigate that? Just
So what I've seen, especially for rural, I've seen in every county there's a Washington, in every county.
Yeah.
But and in every city and town. I think it's more on the lines of getting more descriptive inside the metadata to actually describe that this is not Main Street in Fox, Oklahoma. I think it's more getting more accurate with the data around the street rather than just the street above.
Yeah.
About the street, but it's also locations, what piece that boundary is, and what,
So let's go back even before the data. And I pulled this up because somebody made a comment in the chat. Aaron. Policy. You avoid duplicates by saying you can't do that. Sorry about your bad luck. I mean, and literally, like, I don't know, in Virginia, we're kind of cold-blooded because we would take people to court over this. I mean, not developers. This was more of like addressing issues. We've had people that wanted to fight with us about posting their address, and there's nothing that a judge hates more than seeing a row of public servants in a courtroom because somebody had the wrong address posted on their iron gate and they refused to change it because they thought that they were above the policy. Okay. It goes back to policy. When I talk to you about the workflow, foundationally where it starts is at the policy and documentation level. How many of you have addressing ordinances? And I want you to drop it in the chat too. How many of you guys have addressing ordinances? Okay, raised hand. Okay, good. So some folks do. Maybe you have them, but you haven't seen them in 20 years. Because addressing ordinances really kind of started coming out in the late 80s, early 90s, when E911 was starting to become a thing. Okay, and a lot of folks haven't seen them. They're collecting dust somewhere. How many of you guys have seen your original addressing maps? Whether it's grid or, okay, that's good. Yeah, you don't count. That was a new thing for you. But I've gone into localities and people are still using addressing grid maps that are like, they're like on papyrus paper. They're like holding on by scotch tape and a prayer. And they're still updating them. And I'm like, guys, the next time you pull this out, it's just going to crumble into dust. Can we do something, please? And this is the kind of stuff that I work with people on. So, but going back to the policy, you need to have a code, an ordinance that states X department or entity is the addressing authority. And this is what their responsibility list is. This is what we do. And it also needs to have a section in there about violations. And you also need to have support and be willing and ready to resolve any violations. Yes. Okay, so I will say at the national level, there's nothing that's going to prevent, there's no software where you're going to run through and it's going to say, you have two road names that are the same, where it's going to come in as an address. So if you have an address of 123 North Main Street and that's duplicated, that's a big issue.
So you're saying in this there's First Main Street, in the same county, there's First Main Street. Will next gen be able to just simply say that it's a different city?
So yes, because you have to populate in community. That's a required field. So if it's in a different zip code, different. Yes.
It's a PSAP boundary issue, right? So as long as you're in a different PSAP, you should be.
Yeah, you could, but you can also have a lot of multiple zip codes in one PSAP. And so like you have to be careful. And I say anything that has the same first word. So like we had this, we worked with the county, a locality in Arizona, and they're like, well, the developers, they just name everything desert. And I'm like, stop letting them do that. That's totally on you. And the issue is within the same, largely is within the same zip code. So when you have things that occur, but then again, if you look at the model, you have a zip code field, you have in community, you have neighborhood. Now, a lot of those things are not required, okay? But if you have situations like that, that's where you want to start. And I know that a lot of people don't do this, but I'm always a big fan of let's start putting boundaries around our neighborhoods. Let's quantify that in GIS. You know, I understand we have like informal community names, like I get that, but let's try. It depends on the logic. I don't know what the toolkit does.
Duplicates, if you put your data out perfectly, duplication is not an issue. Okay. But there's a human aspect of duplication versus the machine aspect of duplication. Whenever you're taking it at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're saying go to 300 West Main, da 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 da. Okay, and this ambulance driver knows he's got 3 cities he can respond to. Right. Now he's confused because he's going to be an hour away from figuring out the right location. Right. So there's the human interface. Right. Now, with the mapping side of things, with the standard, as long as you fill out that is Main Street in Fox, Oklahoma, right, and that is the 300 block of it, you won't have, that's the level of duplication. If you fill everything out, you can't have multiple streets with the exact same range, with the exact same town. If you fill it all out, you truly would have to have true duplication. But that is a machine side. That's the perfection machine side. The common sense is, let's not even get close to letting that be the problem. Let's fix it way before the machine is the problem.
Yeah.
Because you can define it so well that the machine will add, the data will completely cleaned up unless you truly overlap name, range, location, everything. That's the horrible duplication that you can't fix.
I'm not really worried about duplication in our data set. I'm worried when we turn over to the county that we're gonna have duplicates from the federal side to the county side. That's more what my concern is. And really that's more the county's issue than it is the federal issue.
In the neighborhood, I think it's the neighborhood. Then it will check that.
Yeah.
And that's how you get the, okay, every town's got a Main Street, every town's got a Washington, as long as it's identified and goes, this is such and such road name in Fort Sill. Okay, as long as it can exist anywhere in the county, as long as it's not Fort Sill.
Yeah.
We do have one road that has the same name, but one's a road, one's an avenue. And then
That's
one
not the
other
same
one,
name.
one's a road, one's a circle.
Not the same name.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah, it's not the
why
same
I'm
name.
confident. I don't think Dibs should be that.
It's not a recommendation, but I guarantee developers are gonna do it. Oh,
It's the same name.
okay.
It's the same name. Hush. Yes. And here's the reason why. You have a party at your home. You have a child you have guests at your home. You have a child who's drowning in a pool. Do you think somebody is going to know the difference between Mulberry Court, Mulberry Terrace, Mulberry Way? This is why I say I recommend to people, don't approve, even if the first name is the same, don't approve it.
So we're not the approving authority with the name, it's the Criminalization Board.
Mhm.
These are our nation's heroes. So
Sure.
heroes are named, can be named the same.
We've got roads like that.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't have that authority, so you can't name that. We can recommend.
Yeah, and that's what I would encourage is make recommendations, but just do your best to make sure that there are no address duplicates and that there's enough difference where if you have an emergency and somebody calls, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's.
Well, we have 3 different buildings that are what we call Brown Hall with a different first name. That's the problem, I mean, so.
Yeah.
We get it, and that's kind of how we're working through, but I don't think that's gonna be, because they have different facility numbers and addresses, so you know, be an issue for our dispatch.
And a lot of that may not be, but like you goes right back to it. The, machine side of things, and the human interface is what you're gonna run a problem with first. Because whenever that dispatcher is trying to tell that responder to get out there, that's the first place you're gonna have a breakdown.
Yeah.
It's the first place you're gonna have a breakdown, because they're gonna hear mulberry, what else? I don't know, it's mulberry. Now, the good thing is, a lot of people in their mind go, well, that's the mulberry, like in Ardmore, we have the tree streets. It's the cherry, the ash, the oak, the da-da-da-da. You get an idea of the neighborhood from it, but once you're in there, I need details. Those get lost fast.
Right.
Yeah, that's why you don't want the duplication, because those details get lost fast, and you need details.
So it's now 25 after, and I will let you know that we've gone, because we had kind of a long intro today, we have gone over, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we have gone over about 20 to 30 minutes each course. So if you guys want to take a very fast break, that would be good. I don't know if you guys need to run to the restroom or, you know, get a snack, but you know, we can take a quick break if you guys want. It's up to you.
Yeah, so I was a 81 came to my one uniform, that's now a 12 game. So I was a whole, so GWS to us was DTSS.
Yeah. So I know that now ArcMap is not on the new GWS coming out.
Really?
So the ones, I was in Korea first, and we were still able to use ArcMap. I only used it for school. And when I went to Kentucky, that's all it needed. So I had to do like a how-to guide.
Yeah.
They already got the new system.
Sure.
So whenever, yeah, there's no ArcMap. There's no ArcMap. Like, you cannot download it.
See that on our level, like our range control, there's stuff you can say, because they have what they call SD, an RMPK extends versus the range manager toolkit. And they have surface data zones. And those are generated with RMPK, what that is, they were firing with this munition, this range, this, and if it does your safety standard, there's still stuff using that. So, you know, we have 10A, ArcMap, and we're running the 2.9 Pro. We just, you know, of course, we have more enterprise installations in the Army. So we're running all that. So it's great for us, but now we have to service 10.8, 10.7, 2.9, 2.6.
Yeah, I get all your emails. I used to be a member of the SCOG, so I get all your SCOG emails and stuff, but we just can't attend a lot of stuff anymore. But I've known you for a while, probably well over a decade, you know.
Yeah.
So we got our data file, we reviewed it. We sent it back to the vendor, the Navy. The Navy's going to send back early November. We're happy to provide that to you guys. Our concern is the Army. We have this data scheme that we have to go by. And so maybe not, it's STSFIU, Space Data Center. And then each DOD entity has a different adaptation of that. So, and they haven't formulated the next Gen I1 into that schema yet. And so we're required to store our data one way, and they have all these attributions that are different from what that schema are for NINA, the next gen. So we don't know whether we're going to embed them and try to go this route. We don't know whether we're going to store them separately or certainly, separately. We don't, so we're trying to figure that out, but we don't even know what we got. Because we have nobody else to ask, so I'd be happy to give it to y'all or run through the toolkit just to see if it meets the standards, and then moving forward, this is simple network tables, raw fish, bone, generated, we're 30%.
No, he might still be there. He might still be there. I don't know, but I know he didn't come, and I'll be pretty much. I don't know. I don't know about Brian. Where that matters.
Yeah, I mean, but we want to help, but we don't have to help. You know? I mean, that's, yeah. Well, yeah, they gotta check, you know, stuff too, so. Can they? If they go through the system, yeah, they could. Should they? You know, it just depends on the Army. Or, you know, and then we have some really remote roads that they should go on. Because we're, I don't know what, we have our own 911. That's county certain, it's going to do right now. I agree, so if they stay with their home, he's not green group, like, but going out in the ranges is a little bit more of an issue because we're actively firing munitions and we don't want them in certain areas at certain times. And so obviously, anyway, I digress, but, and then even overflight, like we just got a call, USDA wants to do overflight of our installation, or no, we don't have a problem with it, but now they're trying to lock down the springs. It's like, why wouldn't we want, you know, USDA to overfly, you know? Yeah, sure. Well, we generate all of our own. We got 5 centimeter for all 240,000 acres around us. We share a lot. They share data with us. A lot of data though, and we can't just publish it for you know to be consumed. And you know, there have been times we even thought, oh, yeah, we can give it to them. They got the state entry housing. You know, we thought about even using it. It's too much data for them. You know, so I wish I brought a car with me, but I'll okay, yeah, sure you do. Yeah. Yeah.
Ron and I used to be
Yeah. Yes. If you've been GIS in Oklahoma for a decade or more, then you gotta know Shelley is. And Charles, you know, we used to go to all the case dogs and all that stuff for a while, and then the Army got to where they go in, you know, and so probably stopped her. Right. But yeah, I mean, I know other people, you know, I mean, obviously Judy, I think Amber, she's not really doing GIS anymore. She's one of our she was doing a lot of our stuff at our range. She hasn't really done He's been around, but he used to work for Chesapeake. He's Oklahoma State graduate. He got his GIS degree from, so, and then he's been with us. He's our resident genius, like, because I'm old school GIS, like, and he comes in, he goes, have you thought about this? I'm like, I mean, it's just great. Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm a green student. That's what I was like, because I used to do GIS and as a green student, and then I transitioned. And I've been doing that so for 15 years now. So.
All right, we're back. Some of us are back. Shelley's not back yet. Okay, so we've talked about the role of the addressing authority. Now I want to talk to you about the role of public safety, okay? Because all of you are going to have to work together to get this thing where it needs to be and to continue on that path of success. So from a public safety perspective, what you all are going to need to do is engage in that addressing and road center line process. If you need to force your way in, then do that. I don't care. That's part of being proactive, because you need to make sure that you're getting ahead of things before they get entered into GIS, before addresses are distributed, before things become official, because when bad addresses are distributed and they become active, it's real hard to get people to change them. Okay. So push yourself into that process. If you need help, that's why I'm here to do strategic planning and have those difficult conversations and be yelled at on your behalf. So I'm fine with that. And I also want you guys to be very proactive in public safety and first responders and letting people know where you're having issues in terms of addressing, road center lines, anything that y'all are seeing in the GIS data. You need to bring that to the attention of the appropriate authority. And that's, again, why we've established roles and responsibilities as part of our workflow. Also assist with data creation. GIS people, I'm specifically talking to you. You have no business creating call routing boundaries. And I'll tell you why. Because there's a tremendous amount of liability associated with that. I know as GIS people, I am one, we like things to be pretty and look nice and be topologically sound, and we like everything, okay, but sometimes that's not how it works out, okay? Sometimes in public safety, when we start talking about call routing boundaries, it gets ugly, okay? And that's why you need to get help in understanding where those boundaries are, okay? And so part of what we talk about is boundary facilitation, and that's a service that I lead with DataMark. But basically, it's a situation where you talk with your neighbors and you have all the entities in the room. You have public safety, you have GIS, and if necessary, the addressing authority, and you kind of talk through these different scenarios. So the image that I put on the screen is a real life scenario that we have an address point that actually falls within a gap, okay? And you have to understand what that means for call routing. From a GIS perspective, this just looks ugly. Like we don't like this because it's topologically, it's ugly, right? And it's not right. But from a call routing perspective, what does a gap mean? I'm asking the class, what does that mean if there's a gap between two PSAP boundaries? Call's not routed, okay? So the question that you have to ask is, who should get the call first? And these are the conversations that we have as part of boundary facilitation, okay? As a GIS person, you might be inclined to just, snap the boundary down this way, but that might not be true, because maybe this driveway actually comes down here, and this is the PSAP that should be answering that call. So there are some decisions that have to be made from a boundary perspective that the GIS people really should not be making, okay? And so these are the conversations that we have. And the same with an overlap. You don't want overlaps, because then the call will go to default routing. And do you really want a machine making that call for you? Okay. You guys also need to keep up to date your MSAG and LE, okay? Because that's still going to be a thing for a while. Okay, you want to make sure that the data it's in your GIS is reflecting the same information that's in your MSAG and your LE. Okay, it's still relevant. You can't just ignore it. Okay, and like as part of our data remediation process with DataMark, we'll provide back to you a list of issues that are in your MSAG and things that you can bring to AT&T to fix that. I'm just assuming that AT&T is everybody's MSAG here in the state of Oklahoma. But we've worked with a lot of different providers. Some people have never seen their MSAG, or they're charged thousands upon thousands of dollars to get access to it. How many of you have seen your MSAG? Okay, that's good. That's good. So yeah, it's just something that you might want to stay aware of. Okay. As public safety, you also have a responsibility, and you can bring your GIS folks in on this, but you want to talk to your vendors. You want to talk to all your public safety vendors, your CAD vendor, your 911 system vendor, and your core services provider vendor when that becomes known. You need to understand that the state has a data model for NG911, but each of your system vendors might have additional requirements of the data that require maintenance as well. And how are you going to maintain that? So your CAD system may or may not accept GIS data. But if it does, that vendor might have additional requirements of that data beyond what's in the model. Okay, so you guys need to be aware of that. If you're going through an update, if you're transitioning CAD systems, the GIS data that you're using today might not work for that business need. So you just need to be aware of that. Call them up, have the conversation. If you're not comfortable, call one of us. We can help you have that conversation. What's the schema? What do I need to have? Okay. Okay, so from a GIS perspective, you need to understand what you're doing. And, you know, the toolkit's going to help you, okay? It's going to help you. We have our own GIS data validation software. Intrado has theirs. Data Master, like, and any vendor has a lot of different, there's a lot of different validation softwares out there. But what I need you to understand is that they're just tools. They are just tools. If you don't understand how to maintain the data and what to put in the different fields, you're not going to be successful. Okay, so I do encourage people to go back to the model and look at what's required. Okay, and I'll show you a real quick example of, I was in Alabama a couple weeks ago at the MENA Gulf Coast Conference. And one of the things that I asked was can you guys give me some local examples of some obvious issues that you're struggling with? And so what they did was they put something on a listserv, and people sent back their problems. And I just wanted to give you guys an example of this. So I pulled the screenshot that they sent me in the email, and then all the stuff that was in the email. So the question here is, how do I manage my road center lines when I have a road center line that goes between two different municipalities? One is county, one is city, and they have two different addressing systems. What do I do? And how many of you, when you talk about drawing in a road center line, do you always do it in the direction of travel? Address or road center lines should be drawn in the direction of increasing address range. Okay, it's not automatically in the direction of travel. Okay, especially when you're talking about, well, my CAD system, I need a routable data set. Okay, that's fine, but you're going to have to use the attributes and know what attributes to populate to make that information reflect correctly. Okay, so the answer to this question is, this is where the in-community field becomes incredibly important in your GIS data. In-community is a required field, so leaving it null is not appropriate. You can't do that. It's either unincorporated or it's the incorporated municipality in which the road center line is located, or that side of the road. So the correct answer is the left from and the left to have one range that reflects what's on the left-hand side of the road. And on the right-hand side, that's going to have a right from and a right to that reflects the range on that side of the road. Don't try to make it look pretty. It's not going to. Things in the real world are ugly, okay? But this is just an example of how the toolkit's not going to help you with that. Neither is our software can point out like certain things within the data, but you're still going to have to know how to look at the data and figure out where you're going wrong. Okay, so these things are just tools. So this is one of the reasons why I tell everybody, you guys cannot just pull somebody off the street or out of a department and expect them to be in charge of your NG911 data that's saving lives. I always tell people, and I didn't say this in the last two classes, but what I always like to tell people in any webinars that I do is that in NG911 GIS, people are becoming geospatial first responders, which is literally the truth, because your data is being used before a call ever goes into the PSAP. So there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that lies with you. And so these are just the different things that people bring to me and ask. Okay, this is why I'm telling you that, yes, you know how to go through the mechanics of the toolkit, that's fine. but that's not going to answer all of your questions and help you maintain every little piece of your data.
It was at the class last time, and it was a phrase that has stuck in my mind more times than not. Functionally broke is not the same as
fixed.
Bingo. Because GIS represents reality. If reality is that messed up with ranges, and I've even seen it where a range goes one direction on one side of the road and the other direction on the other side of the road, and they actually go the wrong way. At some point in time, you can make GIS, you can bend it enough to make it function, but at some point in time, you need to look at the human interface versus the computer interface and go, the human interface it's broken. We can modify it and twist it and functionally break it and make it work. But at some point in time, we need to step back and go, common sense here. Let's fix reality and not just work around broken reality.
Yeah. And that's a very common thing. Sometimes our data, a lot of times our data is ugly because it's reflecting what's really going on. You know, you may have entire subdivisions where the addressing is just foobar. I mean, that's just the way that it is, you know, and oh, well, I didn't think about that, but we actually, there you go. Yep.
Okay, this is a 410.
Yep.
You know, somebody died.
Yeah, and you don't want that because that's the stuff that puts you in the paper and the national news, and you know that's, I mean, that's, you don't want negative attention. You want positive attention. You want to go and to your PIO in your county and say, look at the good work that we're doing with NG 911. Look at how we're pioneers and thought leaders in the state and how we're handling these different situations. Understand that data validation is an iterative process. Like I said, when a vendor hands you back your data, that's when the hard work begins, because you have to know how to maintain the data and make sure that it stays validated. Okay, and that is a constant process. I'm not saying that every time you add in an address point, you need to validate your data, but you do need to have a routine schedule validation. Okay, and then obviously you want to upload to the repository because that's kind of like the state's area where all of the data is going to go. So we kind of touched on this earlier about how important communication and education are. I told you about looping in all of these different people in the addressing and road center line plan review process, developing the policy that's needed to establish the addressing authority to give you guys the teeth to do your job. Okay, have a feedback loop. All right, if somebody brings a discrepancy to you, don't write it on a post-it note, document that somehow, put it in an email, use a ticketing system. A lot of IT ticketing systems have like an exchange type of situation where you get a ticket and then you can like add notes to it. Okay, you want to make sure that you start that process of having a date and time stamp. Education. We are going to be, like I said, doing the toolkit class coming up soon. Participate in as much training as possible. There are talks about doing some other trainings like for addressing. Okay, so just kind of be engaged with the state and stay aware of the things that are going on. If you have people who are not public safety and don't really know how to manage data for public safety, whether that's addresses, road center lines, or GIS data, send them to these classes. We've had addressing folks that were not public safety or GIS in these classes. Very, very important. How often does the database need to be uploaded to the repositories? Is every time a new address is created? No. What would you say, Shelley? Sorry. Shelley's got to run up here and talk.
So I know one of the questions is, and we get this a lot, is how often you should update to the repository. Lance and the 911 management team are getting ready to start the conversation about implementing a policy about how long you should do that. But for right now, it's really just kind of when you feel that you need to do it. Keep in mind, as Lance said earlier, we are uploading this data to the National Address Database and to Google. The more current your data is, when we upload into those systems, the better your system is also going to be. So, you know, monthly, you know, it's what, maybe every 6 weeks, I don't know right now, but Lance is working on that policy. But the more accurate you have it into the repository, the better it will be when it goes up to Google into the map.
Thank you, Shelley. Yeah, that's all part of the workflow, right? Like when I said, I want you guys to have your GIS data, your 911 systems, the repository, all of that stuff should be reflecting the same information, your spatial interface data, all of that stuff. So just make it, and that's part of the pathway. And that should be in your SOPs. When we talk about your ordinance, that's the legal part, but the SOPs always back up the ordinance. Document that communication pathway in your SOPs. Okay, when you start talking about here's how we assign an address, here's how we put it in GIS, here's what we do with it next. It should all be documented so that there's no interruption in that process. All right, I wanted to share with you guys this pilot project that I'm working on that I'm kind of excited about. So I can't walk away from here. The urge for me to just walk around and like yell at everybody is great. So not yell, but so one of our clients on the East Coast, I went through a strategic planning process with them, and it was a county on the East Coast, and they said to me, because I always say, where are your problems, where are your struggles, and they just unload, and that's fine, okay, that's what I want. But they said, look, we have this college campus that has like 60 to 70 addresses or buildings that have one address. They all have one address. And when they call 911, it comes into the CAD as one address. And we keep a paper map in the PSAP. And then we also provide first responders with paper maps. And the first responders go to the campus. Nothing is clearly signed or labeled. And so they always have to call into the PSAP to figure out where it is they're going. No problem with that, right? So the college is actually within a municipality that's their own addressing authority, and they have their own public safety. And then the college has their own GIS and their public safety. But then the county also has to respond as well. So there are numerous entities involved in this situation. Okay, but this came about as part of the strategic planning process. So one of the things that we decided to do was to have a larger meeting about this. And we included the county's GIS addressing and public safety, the town's addressing and public safety, and then the college's the college's GIS and addressing, and their public safety also provided input. So we had numerous stakeholders engaged in this conversation. And basically the decision was made, and this is actually a screenshot from our software, our 911 GIS validation software. What we did was we identified the rights of way that could potentially have a name. Okay, this was based on the NENA recommendation of two or more structures that share a right of way. The right of way should be named. When I was an addressing authority, I always said you could possibly go up to 3 or 4, because 2 is a little aggressive, I think, especially if you have a lot of development going on in your community. Requiring road names, depending on how that works within your locality, can be a little aggressive. So you could say 3, maybe even 4, if everything is appropriately signed and you have the space for addressing, and you're sure that there's not going to be a 5th. Okay. So we went through and we sat together in this room and we identified these rights of way and we drew them in. So the goal here, what the college is planning to do is they are planning to go back to their administration and talk about donor opportunities for getting their names, their roads named. So if you want to be a donor, then we get your name on a sign, and that's very appealing, right? From a college perspective, to get these donors. So the donors are going to donate money and get their name on a sign, and then all of these structures are going to have addresses off of these new road names. In the meantime, we're going to send the college kids into these different buildings to collect the data. Where are the entrances? Where are the offices, the classrooms, the dormitories? And we're going to get all of that information and put it into the GIS. And so it's this kind of collaborative, collective thing that we're all working on together. But it would not have been possible if not for communication. And this has been an issue, they've said, for well over, probably close to 20 years, they've had this problem. And they've had several things, incidents where they've gone out and had these issues. So I just wanted to share this with you guys because I think it's really neat and I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome. Okay, so data editing and management. You want to follow the best practices for GIS data management. And, that's something that your vendor, if you're choosing to have someone help you with your GIS data, that's something that they should help you with. I know from our perspective, we do provide kind of some trainings and things like that to help you understand what you should do to keep your data going in the way that it should be. Obviously, maintain the required fields. Okay. You want to follow parsing standards. Make sure you're not jamming everything into one field. Standardize your attributes, which the toolkit can help you with. Okay, so you can run that data through the toolkit to help you standardize, and it makes it really, really easy. All right. So when you update your public safety systems, you want to do this frequently. You want to make sure that all of your systems are reflecting the same information. And like we've been talking about, document. Include all of this stuff in your SOPs. And then when you reach out to your 911 vendor, your CAD vendor, et cetera, you want to understand what the requirements of the data are, okay? Risk mitigation, we've talked a lot about this, right? I mean, this is something that is pretty much, I think it's pretty standard knowledge, but just to reiterate, taking a proactive approach with your data, with resolving anomalies upstream before it actually becomes official. Getting everybody together and talking is really important. And then a shameless plug for strategic planning, because I'm always looking for a reason to come back to Oklahoma. So if you guys need a little bit of extra help, especially if you are a larger locality and you're trying to wrangle smaller munis, or you just don't know where to go or how to get there, strategic planning can be incredibly beneficial. And I've seen a lot of really good things happen. So an ideal NG911 workflow is, this is just focused on the data, okay? Because to try to develop a workflow for the entire process is a little challenging when I don't know the individual situation, just because people do things differently depending on where they are. So you want to go ahead and add your GIS data into your GIS. Use a toolkit to perform the validations, and it's going to give you back that error report. You have to fix things that are errors. Errors do prevent submission to the repository, so you need to get those fixed. But the toolkit can help you with that. And that comes with the remediation. So when the anomalies are identified through the toolkit, then you fix them, okay? And then you upload to the repository, and then you would update all of your systems that consume that GIS data. Now, at any time, somebody can report a discrepancy to you. You want to get that resolved within 3 business days, and that can fit anywhere within this workflow. Are there any questions about the workflow for data? How about any folks online? You guys have any questions online? Okay. All right, how to know if you need help? Well, we talked a little bit earlier, and I asked you the big question, right? Do you have the time in your day to fix your GIS data? If you know it's in bad shape, and how do you know it's in bad shape? I mean, there are some things you can see with the naked eye, but the only way to really and truly know for sure is to get the data assessed. Okay. And if you're going to go with a vendor to help you, a lot of times these are free. Like we do free data assessments, and it's basically like a report card that kind of tells you what the situation is with your data. I think Bruce's group also does them for free, but you have to have your data assessed first. I would say go ahead and run it through the toolkit, but the toolkit cannot just take your data as is. There's some work that has to go into it before you can even run it through. So I would strongly encourage you guys to reach out to a vendor, see what it looks like. They can also give you an estimate of what the time sink is going to be to get that fixed from the vendor perspective. From your perspective, times it by 4, especially if you're the only person managing your data. Okay. So understanding the staffing, you guys already know what your staffing needs are, what you can do, what you can't do. In terms of the knowledge, I think we've already kind of talked about the fact that you can't just throw anybody into this role. of managing the GIS data, you do have to have some experience. And I think with the toolkit, we even said what, like a year of experience to come to the class, a year of GIS experience. Not to say that you can't come, period, and we'll talk about that here in a little while. But for data management, you know, you really want to have somebody who's experienced, okay? And then of course, the time is a big one. And then we talked a lot earlier about the data completeness regarding the layers, the fields, the attributes, etc. And then also make sure you get your ALI and your MSAG looked at too. Compare it to your GIS. So a vendor, like if you would reach out to us, we would ask you for all of that so that we can kind of take everything holistically and look at it, because that's what it's going to be for NG911.
Yes, if it's not what there's in our website.
Where they take it, and they built that inside. Everyone understands what's the difference between inside ranges versus a range that you're used to seeing in here. They're different. It's not a one-to-one. They're related, but it's not a one-to-one.
Assessing your software, like I mentioned before, the toolkit is for desktop software. Okay. So, you know, we've worked with clients in Oklahoma who don't have Esri. They're not Esri shops at all. They're using like MapInfo. And so navigating that has been interesting. Okay. Because the data has to pass through the toolkit. The toolkit only works with desktop. Okay. Grant opportunities were already discussed. Lance told you guys about that at length earlier, but I did include the link to the document on the web. And then here's the important info slide that has the 911 Management Authority's website. It has Lance's contact info. And this is about the Class 2 training. So we will be back on site the week of November 15th. Datamark will be providing a mobile lab like we did last time, but I probably should have verified this. I only have a certain number of PCs. Okay. And there is going to be limited space, I think, in these classes, at least from the mobile lab perspective. I don't know about like the actual classroom. Like if it's big like this, then I think we should be fine. But if it's, you know, it's going to be limited to the size of the room. I'll tell you that, from my opinion. Yeah, and that's not even until January.
Yeah, so, but I'm saying Tulsa was going to be
No, okay, but it's still a big.
It's enough to get 25 people. Laptops, kind of like we're set up.
So yeah,
I want to be very clear about this, and I don't want you guys to be like, man, Annie's a jerk. I mean, low key, I kind of am, but this is not an introductory GIS class. I'm not teaching you how to open ArcMap. And what? That was a hard H. What? I'm not teaching you how to open ArcMap and add data. And don't feel like just because you know how to do that you can take this class. Because this is 8 hours, and I want to be very clear about what you're going to be walking into. I also cannot stop the class to help people learn how to do GIS who have never looked at it before. I want to be very realistic about what the expectations are. If you're not familiar with these terms, you might want to send somebody else who knows, or I would invite you to come as an observer. So you're not actually using the toolkit, but you're kind of like, because a lot of people are like, man, I need to see what's going on in the class. I need to see what's expected. And I want to be abreast of like what's going on with all these requirements that we have to meet. That's fine. That's perfect. Come and watch. Okay. And ask questions if you need to, or talk to your neighbors and see what everybody else is doing. But this is a very highly technical class that we're going to be doing. The toolkit is not intuitive. It's not. Okay. And that's why I've developed an exercise that takes you step by step about how to move through it for your GIS data. Okay. What you could do if we run out of computers, I would encourage people to bring their own laptops, and we can provide the data, but make a comment, right? Like, were you going to say that? Make a comment. The registration link is already out there on the web. Make a comment that you're going to bring your own PC, and we can get you the data before the class so that you can go ahead and have that loaded on there, because you're going to need to install, you're going to need to put the toolkit on, you can put the data on and make sure that you have everything that's needed for the class. Because I don't want the computers to be a limitation of having people come, because there's not going to be a virtual option for this class. There's not going to be a virtual option. So I want to be very clear about that, because there's a lot of value that you can get by coming in person. You can work with other people, you can talk to them and see like what their unique data situations are. You can bring your own data if you want. Just don't throw me for any loops while we're in the class, because keep in mind that we're going to have classroom data, but course data is always controlled. We've introduced error. There's, what I'm saying? Like it's always a controlled data set that we're using. So I just wanted to be very realistic with you. I'm very pragmatic about these kind of things, and I wouldn't want somebody to drive a great distance in a class that they're not technically prepared for, because that can be extremely frustrating.
And so there was a lot of frustration on a lot of team parts, because they know our map, they can pan and zoom and all that, and they can't get into the details of the software. And so they were very frustrated. And we are trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
And because in the registration form is out, it was sent out yesterday. And so if you guys haven't received it, I'll also be sending it out to everyone. And it says, a year of GIS experience and an advanced knowledge of our map. We can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
And we'll have Andy there, Charles will be there, he's written his data, so he's built from ground up.
Mine's running right now in my office.
And so we'll have people there, if you have questions and everything, there's people on hand that can answer questions about.
Any questions from the classroom about the toolkit class?
Crack the toolkit open early, read through it, and you will benefit so much more from those classes.
Is it downloadable, these links?
Yeah.
Yes, if you go to the 911 Management Authority homepage, there's a link on that. It's actually on the GIS Council website too, but there's a link that will take you to how to download the toolkit, the operator's manual, the links to these classes. All of that is on that page. So you can just work through it, go ahead, download it.
We're looking forward to running the data we just got, the should be national standard, through the toolkit, just to see if there's any anomalies and we identify those and maybe push back for ranks to see how it works.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I will say for toolkit, and if you've ever read it very much, whenever you take and you grab your data, you throw it at it, you say run. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, it works fine, your data's fine. You're like, no, that doesn't appear like it did anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at the toolkit, because in the help file of the toolkit, it will say for this tool to run, it needs this feature class, this feature class, and these 10 fields in these 2 feature classes. If it doesn't exist with all that parameters, it's like, oh yeah, we're done. And it will just kind of go, you're done.
Yeah.
So if you get unexpected, that's the reason, because it didn't have parameters to start with.
Yeah, we have, so in the class, we'll actually pull up the README that's associated with the toolkit, because that's where a lot of the information is that's going to teach you what fields need to be populated. That's why I've been very deliberate about how I've designed the exercise, because it takes into account that information. So, but again, we're using a controlled data set, and you guys might not have all the things populated that we have. So if something doesn't work right, you need to go back to the README and understand, okay, what am I trying to do? Is it populated? Is it added in correctly, etc. Now,
here's all your tools, here's all your wrenches, sitting here in nice, smooth, clean order. They're all in the same order, they're the size and everything else. But it doesn't tell you what sequence to use those tools. First tells you the sequence.
Yeah.
If you grab your data and you walk through those steps, it won't tell you to grab a ratchet until you need a ratchet.
Yeah.
It will leave it over there until you need that ratchet. It's been perfect.
How
Thank
old is
you.
the toolkit? I mean, I guess the question is how long has it been building? Just, has it, there's still, are we still expecting to encounter errors or, is it pretty well built and
Some of the tools don't work yet, like the MSAG tools are not functional yet. But it is always under development. And one of the things that I'm going to show you guys in a few weeks is the fact that there's a change log now in the README. So you can actually open it up with every iteration, every version of the toolkit and see what changes have occurred. So it is still under development, but everything pretty much works. I think there might still be an issue with the ESN tool, although I don't know for sure. Yeah. Yes.
The question asked at the last week's class was, how come you can't open the toolkit and walk through like a wizard? It's not
Because it's not.
Because everybody's head is broken so different.
Yeah.
You have a plain toolbox with them lined up, but it doesn't tell you which one's in the right order.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not a wizard. And you're still like even when people like our software, our VEP software, you still have to prep the data and make sure things are parsed correctly or it won't even run. Like you can't have everything concatenated into one field because it won't run it that way and it's not going to do that for you. So there is, no matter what software you're using, there's still that you still have to do that work up front to get it to consume to be consumed by the software. It's, I guess, what I'm offering. So
you don't have the mandatory, it's not gonna work.
right, because
You just have
it's mandatory.
Just like random things in your data.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work. You need the mandatory, at least the mandatory for the tool to even run.
Yes. Yeah.
Give you that table, how it's supposed to
Yeah.
work.
If you're just taking and you've got your left two, left front, right two, right front, center line, all that kind of stuff, and you expect to grab that and we'll work right now in your dispatch and throw it in the toolkit, well, it probably doesn't have your neighborhood communities and all that stuff that's required to function. It's gonna just die. So what works in this existing dispatch, the toolkit needs to have enhanced.
Well,
Sometimes you upgrade your data, sometimes you upgrade your software.
Well, and we had a comment from someone a few weeks ago, not in Oklahoma, but they said they use our software and they're like, well, we don't maintain, like they were upset because they keep getting a lot of validation errors, anomalies while running the MSAG. Well, we don't maintain the MSAG community in our road center lines. And I'm like, that's the problem. That's why it's not working. It's not a required field, but if you want to use that tool, you have to have the data populated. You can't just, because if you don't, then it defaults to the AP field, which is also not appropriate. And that's something that we're working through as well. I mean, yeah, it was just kind of funny. It's like, okay. Now I want to, at this time, ask our friends online, do you guys have any questions about the toolkit or about things that we just, about what we just discussed? Oh, hi, Rachel. My office just converted from Map Info, yes, to Esri products. I'm using ArcPro to maintain my data. I'm only using ArcMap to run the toolkit. You think since the majority of my experience is in Pro, I'll be okay in Class 2? It's a good question, Rachel. Who's like a mainly Pro user in this class? Is anybody? Okay, do you know anything about desktop or are you just Pro?
I know a lot about both.
Okay.
What was the question?
If Rachel's one of our clients, she's asking, her experience is that she was using Map Info, she switched to Pro, but she's only using ArcMap to run the toolkit. Do you think since the majority of my experience is in Pro, I'll be okay in Class 2?
Yes.
I think so.
So
yeah.
The transfer, the reason why the transfer.
Here, come up here so you can talk into this. Sorry. I'm bringing up a guest speaker. You're now in the front of the class. Thanks.
So the reason why Pro and ArcMap is having a fight is due to Python scripting. So how the toolkit is in Map is through those scripts through Python on Map, not through Pro. Pro went through an upgrade with the Python scripting when it was created, making it a lot easier to use, in my opinion. But yeah, so once you essentially build the same toolkit in Pro, it will work exactly the same. You just have to do it all over again in Pro in the new Python. That's all that's different. So the class would definitely be essential.
Charles, couldn't Rachel just go ahead and like take the report that comes out of the toolkit and then make any modifications within Pro?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
honestly, if she wanted to, she could say, hey, Rachel, how's it going? I'll answer this as soon as the email that I get. Hey, Rachel, I would say that you're not going to have a problem being in the class with just having more pro experience than having desktop, because most of the stuff that you're going to run, I know Becca will run it. Is it you or Becca that runs it in ArcMap?
I'm the ArcMap.
Okay. Becca is
is
catalog.
also ArcMap, but I run.
She runs the tools and
I know
catalog.
I run the tools and catalog. She run them in ArcMap.
Okay.
But I know that Becca's definitely got more pro experience than I do, so she'll also.
She'll be able to translate that, and we can walk through pieces and parts of it. That's not going to be an issue. You can do a lot of the heavy lifting for the toolkit in catalog, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the navigation around in ArcMap.
Well, yeah, and I
Because
think,
catalog is going to be very similar.
yeah, I think like part of the exercise would be field calcing, so she can pull her data into Pro and field calc what she needs to, and then Rachel, when it's time to run, you're just going to pull that in through desktop, and then we can run the tools through the.
You'll be
software that
fine.
way. Yeah, you'll be fine. Come on.
You've got experience and enough help here. You'll be fine.
Not me, not for me, from Charles only. Anybody else online have any questions about the content today? I mean, I'd love to know if this was helpful for you. I definitely tried to remove a lot of the heavy GIS stuff. You know, and you guys can unmute too to ask a question. That's fine too.
I have a quick question, and I've talked to Charles about this. So I'm sure he may laugh about it, but I downloaded, when I first started a year and a half ago, I didn't know anything about addressing. They just told me they needed me to get it done. And essentially it was easier to build it from scratch rather than go through and look at all of the last 6 people who did it their own different way. And so I ended up finding the address data management solution through ArcGIS Online. And that's how I started to build mine. And I'm just curious if anyone has had any discussion with the developers on that side to make it more compatible, user-friendly with the toolkit. If not, it's not a big deal. It's just a curiosity.
No, it's all desktop, unfortunately. That's not to say that's not in the future plans, but I think right now they are wholeheartedly focusing on developing the tools out for desktop, and that's just kind of where the efforts lie at this time.
Gotcha. Yeah, the solution you can bring down into either Pro, well, I don't think it's on ArcMap. I think it's on Pro only.
Pro, yeah, Pro too.
Yeah, it's basically how I built, ours, and it functions very similar, but there's a few outliers that kind of make it not work well with the toolkit.
Sure. Yeah, because remember, guys, that the toolkit is the digital kind of front for the standard. Okay. You guys might maintain other information in your address points. Like, for example, when I was doing address management, we would always tie the address point to the parcel number. So I kept the parcel number in my attribute table for each address point. But you guys might have additional information, and that's okay. But when you upload it to the repository, it's going to drop those additional fields. It's only going to take what's required by the model. So if you have like voting precinct information or anything like that, that's not going to push through to the repository. But I do want to make sure that you guys are not maintaining any PII in your data, because like we received a data set a long time ago that had people's phone numbers, their medical issues, their names, and like our heads exploded when we opened the attribute table, and we immediately had to like get on the phone with them to help them cleanse that data because they didn't know how. So there is I think in the standards you guys have the comments field.
Yeah, no kidding. You bring up a good point, because what we have seen is that people who have uploaded data to their repository already in the standard, there's a comments field, and people were putting addresses in there because they needed that. And so we got a hold of it and kind of say like, no, you can't have this, because they had name, addresses, phone number, stuff like that. Right. So we worked with that particular PSAP to have them add additional fields, because Charles could speak to this. He's got hundreds and hundreds of other data fields outside of that standard.
Oh, yeah.
But when you upload it to the repository, it just cuts to what we specifically need. So any kind of that information that you have in there, just put it in different fields. And then that keeps it clean for us. For the repository, keeps it to where that information isn't there, but it still allows you all to have that information that you need for your side of the house.
Yeah, a perfect example is I'm running SDE, and I've got my street centerline file, and it's got pavement management. It's got a bunch of other stuff in there that has nothing to do with anything as far as next gen. My 911 points, my address points. I've got toggles on there, whether it's a medical marijuana restricted, whether it's a sex offender restricted, whether it's all that stuff in there. It's tied all into that data set, so I don't have to maintain multiple address points. I don't have multiple data sets. That stuff I still maintain locally in SDE, and I use the toolkit to go in there, extract what I need, bundle it up, and ship it out the door. I took last week to see how long it would take, and this was with even me doing some other extractions. From my normal production, from the time that I put a dot on the map till the time I saw it pop up on OK Maps, less than 30 minutes. That was me creating a new address to popping up on the state system. And once I toss it there, they push it up to Google. They push it up to the NAD. So no. But my responsibility on getting it out there and putting it in the lane to get shoved down the road was less than 30 minutes. That's a very tangible workflow to work with anybody out there. So it can be done and maintained. Yeah.
It's very much, it just basically zip and upload. So once you get to that point, it's easy.
Best way to think about it, how many times have you gone through software upgrades? We know that we're going through patches and security fixes, and I mean, it's always annoying to take and upgrade apps on your phone. When's the last time you upgraded your data? You built the schema probably 15 to 20 years ago. When's the last time you upgraded your data on how it was stored? So that's the main thing that we're doing right now, is doing a huge upgrade to data.
Every 2 or 3 years, we upgrade, translate that all over again. So if you go the opposite direction too, where it's painful because you're always upgrading your data.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But you guys are probably better off than a lot of those because we don't have to do that. There's nothing forcing us to do it. Like, it's like, we can get by. We don't want to have to go through the growing.
I don't get a brand new phone until something really dies on it because I don't like the setup of it,
Yeah.
So anyhow.
All right. Any other questions online? Do you guys have any questions or comments? You can unmute if you want to. Did you guys find this content valuable? Definitely was different than the first time around, right? More workflow centric. How about you guys online? Did you find this useful, beneficial? Yeah, raise your hand in the classroom or in the virtual if you guys thought this was useful for you. Okay. All right, well, I don't have anything else, but just keep in mind that we will be back week before Thanksgiving to teach you guys about the toolkit. We're going to be on site in November and then again in January. So just keep that in mind. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you can reach out to Shelly or Charles. And thank you guys for your time today. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you.